All right, so 6.2 is how we're going to use the normal distribution to find probabilities. So our normal distribution is this symmetrical curve, and then the area underneath is our probability. So if the whole thing is shaded, it's the probability of getting anything under the curve, which would equal 1. And our area is always going to be shaded to the left. So our area represents the probability less than the value. Area to the right would then be 1 minus the value. So if we're looking for greater than, we have to do a little bit of math versus less than, the calculator is just going to give it to us. So in chapter 4, we looked at binomial probability distribution, like the binom PDF and CDF. Now this one, we're going to look at the normal probability distribution. So sometimes, or quite often, we're looking at probabilities of things that have more than 2 options. So if you roll a dice, there's more than 2 options. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. If you pick a card, and you're not looking at more than colors, there's more than 2 options. So sometimes we need probabilities of things that have more than 2 options. So we're going to use the normal probability distribution, and that is based on the normal curve. So think of having questions like, what is the chance of getting an IQ of less than 90? Or if the mean is 50 and the standard deviation is 7, what's the chance of getting a 43? Or what is the chance of getting less than 26? What is the chance of getting between a 38 and a 56? So these are the types of things that you can answer using the norm PDF function and the norm CDF function. And then if you're given a percent, like what value has a 50% chance of occurring, we're also going to use the inverse norm feature on your calculator to find that value. So with the before, I gave you a value and then you used the z-score. And then in like an Algebra 2 course or maybe a college algebra course, you may have then used that z-score and a big Z table to turn that into a percent. Well, there's a function, which is called the probability distribution function, or the cumulative distribution function, that takes it one step further and finds the probability that goes with that. But outside of those classes, people don't do that by hand. They use a spreadsheet or a calculator or some kind of technology to calculate that without looking at a table. Because this table is like huge, it's pages and pages and pages of numbers. And in reality, you don't do it by hand, you use a calculator. So in those classes, like Algebra 2 and college algebra, where you're learning the concepts of the z-score for the first time, most likely, you do it by hand. In stats, it's more about the process and the function and how to do it with technology. So we're going to use the calculator or the app. So like the binomial PDF function, on our calculator, we're going to use the second button, which is that blue button, vars, which is near the arrows. But this time, instead of going all the way down to A, B, and C, we're using 1 for the PDF, 2 for the CDF, and 3 for the inverse. So if you're using PDF, that's exact values. On the calculator, it'll look like, or on the app, it'll look like the PDF, and it'll ask you the X value, the mean, and the standard deviation. On the calculator, it'll ask you those in steps. It'll ask you the X value, the mean, and the standard deviation, like X value, mean, standard deviation, and then it'll say paste, and you'll type each thing, and then you'll highlight this and hit enter, and it'll spit it out for you. If you were to choose number 2, the CDF, it's going to ask you your lower limit, your upper limit, your mean and your standard deviation. On the app, it looks like this in the screen where you just type them with the commas in between. Now, if you're doing a less than or equal to problem, your lower limit is going to be -1 E99. That's like saying like 0.0000000000000, like negative that one with like 99 zeros. It's just because you can't type negative infinity to in the calculator. So you're trying to say a lower limit of negative infinity. To type that, you just type -1, and then the E button is second, which is the blue button, and then comma, which is right above 7. So you do -1, second, comma, 99, and that's how you get the E there. And that's just telling your calculator, like, hey, I want, like, negative infinity. If it's greater than, you do the same thing, just positive. That's all this is kind of telling you right here, is less than and greater than. And then 3, I don't really know why that deleted, but second vars 3 is your inverse norm, where it asks you the area, the mean, and the standard deviation. Area is just your percent as a decimal. If you don't put it as a decimal, so like if it was 40% and you wrote 40, you'll get an error. And again, if you're using the website or the calculator, it just shows up on the screen as 3 separate things. It'll say area, mean, standard deviation. And then on the calc or the internet, it'll ask you left, right, or center. Left is less than. Right is greater than, and then center is between for the left. Greater than is right, center is between. That's on the calculator or the app. Calculator or the website. On the app, you have to do a little bit of math when it's less than, greater than, or greater than or between. And I'll show you as we go. But those are just some quick notes. You will have this part on the note sheet. I just wanted you to kind of see that. So now we'll do examples of each of those, like in this problem, just so you can see how that works. All right, so final exam scores in a statistics class were normally distributed with a mean of 63 and a standard deviation of 5. Find the probability of getting a 72. So 72 is an exact number. What am I doing? So it's going to be norm PDF. So exact number tells us norm PDF. So second vars 1, norm PDF. If you have the calculator or the computer, just answer the questions it asks you. If you have the app, you're going to type the X value, which is a 72, and then the mean, which is a 63, and the standard deviation, which is a 5. So 72, comma, 63, comma, 5. Now hit enter, and regardless of which thing you have, you should get 0.016. That would be your probability of getting a 72. B, find the probability of getting less than a 60. So this is going to be the same. We're both doing norm CDF because we have a range. So second vars 2. If you have the calculator or the computer, it's going to already have the -1 E99 in there. If you have the app, you have to type that. So -1 E second comma 99. That's our lower because we're less than. Our upper limit is what we're trying to get to. Then we do our mean and our standard deviation. So 60, 63, 5. So you would just, on the calculator, you would just type each thing separate. Then you'd hit enter and you get 0.274. Again, these are the notes I would write like on your note sheet that you're going to send me a picture of. That way, if you get the wrong answer, I can figure out, I know what you typed in your calculator, regardless of whether you typed it next to the words lower, upper, mean, standard deviation, or whether you typed it like commas. Okay, so now if we look at getting more than, so for both of us, we're still going norm CDF. But this time our lower limit is the 57 because we're going more than. So second vars 2. On the calculator and maybe the computer, it might save the stuff from before. You're just going to delete the lower that was there and type 57. And here we're all going to type 1E99. So we do 1 second comma 99. And then put the 63 and the 5 if your calculator didn't save it. And then we're going to type, or then our answer is 0.885. So again, when it's less than, your lower is the 1E99 and it should be negative. When it's greater than, your upper is the 1E99 and it should be positive. And then when you're doing between, it's still norm CDF, but those numbers are your lower and your upper. So that's your lower and your upper. Mean and standard deviation stay the same. So second vars 2, 60, 70, 63, 5, and we get 0.645. So P is your exact, C is any of your less than and greater than. Unlike the binom, you use the same button every time. You don't have to go back to your references and go, oh, do I do the 1 minus? Do I change? You don't have to do any subtracting. The only thing you change is whether you use the positive 1E or the negative 1E. But all the other things are the same. So why don't you pause the video and do the you try 1. All right, so here we have a mean of 68 and a standard deviation of 3. The first one is probability they scored exactly a 65, so that's PDF. So we're going to do second vars 1. Let me hit the right buttons. Second vars 1. So we want the x value, which is a 65, then the mean, then the standard deviation. So I'm going to type those. 65, 68, 3. Well, let me type it right. 65, 68, 3. And I get 0.0081. And then less than tells me norm CDF. And negative 1E99 is my lower. That number becomes my upper. And then my mean and my standard deviation. So that's 2. So I do negative 1E99, 63, 68, 3. And I get 0.048. More than a 60 tells me norm CDF. 60 becomes the lower. Regular 1E99 becomes the upper. Mean and standard deviation stay the same. So 60, 1E99, 68, 3, 0.996. And then between a 60 and a 70, those are just my lower and upper. So 60, 70, and then 68 and 3. 60, 70, 68, and 3. We get 0.744. So that's how you use the norm CDF and norm PDF. Let's look at going the other way if you're given a percent. All right. United States, ages 13 to 55 plus of smartphone users approximately follows a normal distribution with approximate mean and standard deviation of 36.8 years and 13.9 years respectively. Find the 30th percentile. So 30th percentile means we're looking at 0.30% or an area of 0.30 and interpret it. So when you're given a percent, that's when you do the inverse norm. Inverse norm. So that's the 3. So second vars 3. Second vars 3. So area is 0.3. Mean is 36.8. Standard deviation is 13.9. And then we get 29.5. So that's the value. And then we interpret that. So 30th percentile. So that's, and then we're talking about ages. So the ages. So 30% of people who use smartphones are, and then percentiles mean they're that age or less. So are 29.5 or younger. So that's how you interpret a percentile. So pause the video and do the you try too. All right. So inverse norm. This one is the 80th percentile. So we're going to do 0.80. Mean is 36.8. Standard deviation is 13.9. So 0.8, 36.8, 13.9. So we get 48.5. So 80% of people who use smartphones are 48.5 or younger. All right. So let's look at this last set of things. So in the United States, so same information, calculate the IQR. So the IQR is quartile 3 minus quartile 1. So in order to find those, you have to figure out what those are. So quartile 3 is the 75th percentile. Quartile 1 is the 25th percentile. So in order to do that, we need to find those two things. So we're going to do inverse norm for both of those. So inverse norm for the 25th percentile at 36.8 and 13.9. And then inverse norm at 75%. Now, if you're using a newer calculator, and I'm not sure if the online one does this, it might have left, right, center at the bottom. Because we're doing percentiles, they're all left. So leave it just like it is. Percentiles tell you to do left. You don't have to change anything. For B, I'm going to show you a different option. Oh, it's over here. I was like, what's going on? If you have the app, it doesn't give you that choice, so it doesn't really matter. Okay, so 0.25, comma, 36.8, comma, 13.9 gives us 27.4. And then if I do that again, 0.75, comma, 36.8, comma 13.9, 46.2, and then the IQR is just subtracting those. So 46.2 minus 27.4 is 18.8. So that would be our IQR. And then for B, 40% of smartphone users are at least what age? So at least is greater than or equal to. If you have a calculator that has the left, center, right choice, you're going to do the same thing and just change it to right. You're going to do 0.4, 36.8, 13.9, and change it to right. If you're using the app, you don't have that choice. You don't have a left, right, center choice. So we have to do 1 minus 0.4 and get 0.6. Because to be greater than 40, we need 60% less than that. So we're doing inverse norm for 60%. Because if 40% are greater, then 60% are less. So that's what we're working on. So you do have to pay attention to that for this part. So 0.6, 36.8, 13.9, we get 40.3. So why don't you pause the video and try this last one? All right, so IQR is inverse norm 0.25, 81.15, inverse norm 0.75, 81.15, 0.25, 81.15. So we get 70.9, 0.75, 81.15. 91.1, and then if we subtract both of those, I get 20.2 for my IQR. And then if 30% are at least, 1 minus 0.3 is 0.7. So I'm going to do inverse norm with 0.7, 81, and 15. And I get 88.9. So that is how you use the normal PDF and CDF. Let me know if you have any questions, and then next week we will do the practice test. Good luck, and reach out by email. Have a great night.